Good evening, everyone. I appreciate your attendance at tonight's meeting. I know we're starting about an hour later than our standard town halls, but I had the opportunity to bring in a couple of very interesting and talented women to address some of the questions on economic development, and to accommodate that process, I needed to push it back an hour for our start time. Again, we'll go ahead and we'll stay within our 55-minute presentation. There are questions that were submitted ahead of time. I'll also guide us through part of the conversation to keep things moving. But I really enjoy having you submit your questions for our experts. And this is really a session for you to get the information you need to be more successful as a business owner, an ag producer, and also as an Indian landowner. We do have folks who come from tribal governments and the federal government, and I think it's important for them to hear how some of these issues are understood and dealt with in Indian country. Again, if I didn't already state, my name is Jim Wabandato. I'm a program officer with the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, and we've been doing these sessions for about 1.5 to 2 years now, and we've covered some pretty interesting topics. Tonight, we're going to take a closer look at economic development in Indian country and on tribal lands. It can be kind of complicated. I know for a lot of us, just dealing with some of the bureaucratic processes can be a headache and cause us to, either pull our hair out or throw our hands up in frustration. Having said that, I'll go ahead and start alphabetically. Kim, if you could introduce yourself for our audience.
Hello, everybody. As Jim mentioned, my name is Kim Dunn. I'm located in Spokane, Washington. And my background is I am a member of the, pardon me. Should have said that earlier. I am a member of the Little River Band of Ottawa Chippewa Indians out of Michigan. I had previously worked for the IRS for 30 years as a tax attorney. And in that realm, I worked both for estate and gift tax for a good portion of that. And then I also worked for the Indian Tribal Governments Division of IRS. And then I retired here about 2 years ago. And I have, I'm operating my own firm currently. During the time that I worked for IRS, I also sat on various tribal boards that oversaw the enterprises for a number of different tribes. And I currently sit on my tribe's board advisory group. And my primary focus has been overseeing gaming operations. I just wanted to touch on briefly on some information that might be of help to you. I'm hoping that it will come in handy. I am here mostly for questions, but I thought we might visit the IRS's website segment that is devoted to Indian tribal governments, which at times can have information that may be valuable to individual members, tribal members, in terms of business and economic development and just your general personal tax matters. So I'm going to have Jim.
Actually, we'll get to that a little bit later in the conversation.
Oh, no, I wanted to do it right now, Jim.
we need to provide for Amy a chance to share who she is and talk about her experiences.
Pardon me. You're so right. Go ahead.
No, hi, I'm Amy Wilson, and I'm just really glad to be here, especially with Kim and Jim also, of course, but I'm really excited to hear everything that Kim has to share. So I feel really, I guess, honored to be here. But again, my name is Amy Wilson, and I'm the founder of Sea Renewal. I work exclusively in Indian country. I'm not Native American, but I serve Native American tribes. I've worked in Indian country since January of 2015, actually. So prior to Sea Renewal, I worked for the Department of Interior Indian Affairs. I was with the Division of Energy and Mineral Development, And I did various work there, from a lot of field work, mostly, doing planning, a lot of bigger energy projects, some, various projects. And I've also worked at local government, and just have a strong background in land use and economic development and energy. So I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Again, I want to express my appreciation as well as the gratefulness of the Indian Land Tenure Foundation for participating in our event this evening. So I'll just dive right in with the kind of a basic question, and ask for you to discuss a little bit in your careers, or maybe in your personal life, what economic development in tribal communities has been like for your career or for you personally. And Kim or Amy, you can jump right in.
If Amy wants to go first, go ahead, Amy.
Sure, throw me this one. No. No, I think, in my experience working with tribes, I come, with an outside perspective, and every tribe I work with is unique. I feel like the issues are really localized, and in some respects, everyone, your tribes are tackling their own issues, but at the same time, there's kind of these collective issues. But I also feel like there's a tendency, even though everyone says, we want to be different and we want, more of a localized approach, there's still a tendency to kind of have this cookie cutter approach. And I feel like, one of the things that I'm so attracted to Indian country for is because it's complicated, and this complexity really kind of creates this opportunity for tribes to, leverage all of these things that are so unique to them to create value. And, you lose that value when you're, kind of trying to be like everyone else. So, I don't know, it's definitely challenging. So.
Before I have
probably doesn't answer your question at all, actually.
No, that sounds fine. I'll come back to Kim to have her address that. Can you talk about some of the balance between where economic development perhaps fits within community planning? I know that's, where you've spent a lot more of your career. Can you talk about how those two work together, community planning and economic development? Yeah,
definitely. So, depending on the array of plans that a tribe has, economic development is a component of every plan, whether it's obviously an economic plan, but whether it's a land use plan or a natural resources management plan, an agricultural plan, even an emergency plan. Continuity of services during emergencies are huge, and part of that is your overall economy, right? So every aspect of what a tribe is doing and planning for includes that economic development. And I think as an individual, member or business owner, it's important to you or to those folks to be able to, be aware of these documents, number one, but even more so than that, to be a part of these planning processes that take place. So, you're heard, and, you have an influence in the direction that your tribe is going.
I think we might come back to that, because I think that's an important point. But going to Kim then, can you talk a little bit about what economic development has been for you, either in your career or in your personal life, or both? I guess maybe start with yourself. As you've sat on a few different boards, talk a little bit about how that process works from a government level and our tribal government and sovereignty. But I'd also like to hear kind of how you feel your former agency had an impact on tribal communities. That might give us the chance to bring in your website resources.
Right. I really do have that vertical perspective from the ground all the way up to the top in terms of economic development. From the fact that I'm Native and I see my kids and myself benefiting from it educationally, and they're able to do things that they normally wouldn't be able to because of all the hard work that my tribe has engaged in, and working for the federal government. And I'm sure I'm off on this, but I think there's like 460 some federally recognized tribes. And of those, a percentage of them are able to really have made great strides economically. I think one thing that I would say about my experience in overseeing tribes and their enterprises and boards is I'm amazed by the creativity and the devotion. I know in our tribe, our people give 120% when you've got a general manager who's trying to help serve customers in the restaurant because they are understaffed because of a number of reasons, including COVID. And I see things with the tribes and on the reservations and the businesses that you don't see in the great swath of America. And so it has been probably one of the greatest experiences of my life, and some of the best people I've ever met have been through my work with tribes. Obviously, it's a very critical piece to Indian country success. And so for what it's worth, I'm glad that I could be a part of helping to guide our tribe and others, I think a little bit in a good direction. And if I may, I know a lot of the circumstances I've been in overseeing tribes. Sometimes on these boards, I've been the first woman to be on these boards, and I'm able to bring a little bit more perspective from that side of the fence. And I think that's been valuable because, a good portion of our tribal population is women and children. And so that's something else I've been glad to bring to the table.
Okay. I did put up the a couple of resources already now for the folks to get in the chat. I did pull up the IRS tribal member page. I know you wanted to refer back to this earlier, so I'm going to share my screen.
Right, and just one of my pet peeves when people give presentations is, and it's probably just me, sometimes I feel like they move too fast and I can't write down what they're saying and look at the screen at the same time. So I'm going to try and accommodate that. But the page that I would encourage folks to go to, and the one we're going to try and look at, is irs.gov/tribes. And I'm not sure, Jim, if you can go to that one, that's going to help me out to navigate.
Okay, so then when I did that, it automatically switches over to the tribal governments.
Well, we'll fight that as much as we can. So when I worked for IRS, and was working for Indian tribal governments, they asked me to try to create a web page that would promote voluntary income tax assistance in Indian country, because sometimes people can't afford CPAs and or accountants and that sort of thing. They need help with their taxes. But in that process, I was able to help develop what we called at the time tribal resources. And it went over quite well with Indian country. And since I've left IRS, they've modified it, updated it, changed it a bit. But there's some particular resources that I want to point out to you folks because I think they'll be beneficial. And again, just so you can, if you can do anything, write down irs.gov/tribes. And why I'm touching on this topic is because it seems like, unfortunately, IRS sometimes comes up a lot when it comes to business and economic development in Indian country. And so there's some basic links here that I think you may find valuable in that process. So on this page, irs.gov/tribes, there is a couple of the boxes that might be of interest to you. So we see tax law and guidance. If you can remind me, I'm going to come back to the tribal general welfare guidance piece. I just want to touch base on that and just make a small mention about that. You'll notice there that there is frequently asked questions and answers in that box. And then under tribal governments, second box over, tribal status, tax status of tribes. So this has to do with taxable income. Now, what I would say about most of these topics have to do with tribal governments. And obviously you folks are not, I presumably, tribal governments, but there are little tidbits in here that are helpful for business and individual. So that's what I want to point out. Now on this page, you'll see, if you can see it, there's number 12 and 13. Jim, would you mind reading what those links are? 12, if you can see it. It's pretty small on my screen, I know.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself and find a myriad of things. I coughed, and so I muted my microphone. 12 is income from trust lands allotted under other allotment acts exempt from federal taxation, and is income of an Indian from trust land leased from a tribe taxable. Is that on the?
And there was one other one that's farther up there that that was probably one of the most important. Number 9. Could you read that one?
What are some of the exceptions to members of federally recognized tribes being subject to taxes as individuals?
Right. So 9, 12, and 13 caught my eye on that page. And again, if you have a chance to go to this page, or if you have questions regarding IRS, this is the page you want to initially go to. Off to the, if we go back to the boxes. To the right of that is another box. I don't know if our pictures are blocking it, but it's tribal members. That's in that box, you'll see the first bullet is Income Tax Guide for Native American Individuals and Sole Proprietors. That's publication 5424. That one might be a value to some of the folks. And then the one underneath that is the VITA program. And if you could click on that one, Jim. Let's see, and go down to, should say about ITG and VITA. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, go back up. And then it shows ITG's role. So if you click on that, ITG stands for Indian Tribal Governments. That's the division within the IRS. And on that page, it shows down where the links are at the bottom, it shows individuals page. And that, if you want to click on that briefly, Jim, it shows us how you can get transcripts. So, and why this is important is because if you have a problem that involves IRS, you may end up sitting on the phone forever. I'm just assuming that's the case based on what I'm hearing in my realm. So if you can sign up to get your transcript and get it through this process, it may save you some time. And I'm not sure if that also applies to businesses. And then the other, let's see, so go back a page. And this is really, really important. So go to the second link, IRS Office of Indian Tribal Governments. And on this page, they have various phone numbers that you can call. And on the right, you'll see one that says, you might have to cursor down, Jim. It says business and specialty. Let's see, go back up again.
Oh, it's the first box.
Oh, it's the very first one. Okay. If there's anything you remember from what I've told you, save that phone number. Those are the experts within IRS. This is the division I used to work for, and they've got the lawyers and they've got all the people making the decisions. And they, while they don't say in their listing or their phone line, these are the people who can direct you to Indian tribal related questions, including business questions or law questions. Now, sometimes they aren't very helpful, but sometimes they can be very helpful. If you don't use this number, then you're going to end up on the IRS main tax line, which you could sit there for hours for all we know. So, and that number is 1-800-829-4933. And that's again called business and specialty. And then, okay, and then what we'll do is go back to, go back a page to where we have about ITG and VITA. There we go. And if you go down to free tax preparation, right under, it's right there. You're going to see two things. If you could click on that first one, Jim, IRS VITA site locator. Okay. All right. So what this does is it allows you to enter a particular zip code, and then it'll show you a list of VITA site preparers. Now, granted, this is for individuals, but you may go there and run into somebody who can help you with, and these are designed to be specialized with respect to Indian tax law and filing your individual income tax returns and maybe business. Let me just give you one example of information. So on this, in the box, Jim, if you can enter 98101. And then in the miles box, put 100. Now, I know that when we were going through COVID and I worked for IRS, nothing would come up on this. There was nothing open. And so when I brought this up today, I was really surprised at how many different sites there were. Now, of course, this is Seattle. I also entered Spokane, which is where I'm at, and 99201. I always go with the 01s, the downtown area, and I seem to get the most, capture the most. There was quite a few there too. So I was surprised that we're much more back up and running when it comes to trying to help people with tax problems. At least IRS is. I say we, I don't work for them anymore. So let's see here.
And I see within 100 miles of where you live, the Nez Perce Tribal Housing Authority is one of those locations.
Good. Yeah. And again, these people are supposed to, these are specifically supposed to address folks who need help with preparing their returns that are and have tribally related questions. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Yeah, if we can go back to the original first page, back to the boxes. And the last item I want to point out to you is under Get Help at the bottom. So you'll see there, go up a little bit, right there down at the bottom left box. See where it says Taxpayer Advocate Service? If you want to click on that, Jim. Okay, so whenever I have a problem, which I happen to have a problem with IRS right now, if I'm not getting a lot of mileage out of the state of Washington for the problem I have because they're involved, then these are the people you go to. If you don't want to sit on hold for 2 hours and get the runaround, these are the people you go to, because they have very specifically designated time that a time period that they have to get back to you and get real answers. Now, last I heard, they're pretty overwhelmed as well, but this is your best bet. So those are just some examples of the links. There should be some other stuff on tax law on that website, but I think you might find it beneficial.
And Kim's used to going through the government side. A lot of these issues can also be found on the tribal member issues that we've linked on the ILTF website. And you can see some of those same things are highlighted because we went through them for other, excuse me, through the topics. So thank you. I had mentioned earlier, let me kind of stop sharing that, and I'll continue to add additional resources into the chat feature so that you can get those. Bringing back Amy. Can you talk a little bit about, where was I? The importance of good or strong support systems within the tribal government structure for economic development overall. I think you mentioned it, and it's probably one of the biggest issues I try and hammer on. And that lies with the fact that the tribe can do great efforts to start tribal businesses, but to have an effective and fully functional tribal community, I mean, you need individual business owners. Excuse me. So can you kind of address how those rules get put into place and how they can have an impact on individuals as well?
I think, you know, entrepreneurship is really important. And I think all tribes have entrepreneurship. And I think, you know, tribal governments want to facilitate, obviously, a strong economy. But you're dealing with complicated land-based land laws. And there's, you know, a lot of times you don't have storefronts. So if I'm a hairstylist and I want to go open up a beauty salon, there's no storefronts, right? And that's challenging. And, you know, if you're depending on the tribal code, it may only allow, you know, for certain things to happen with a residential assignment or a residential lease. So I think for tribal governments to be able to facilitate economic development, they really need to look at both their land use code, their zoning code, and their business code to make sure that they actually are facilitating economic development within their nation. Because you go, like right now, you know, Native American, it's huge, you know, and everything you see, oh, by Indian, you know, all of this, but at the same time, I go to tribes and I work, you know, all over, and all of them, they don't have storefronts. They don't have the things that people need to be able to actively promote their business, both for members and outside. And I think, you know, broadband's helping that. And that's going to also, I think, open up a whole new area of opportunity, both for the tribe and for the members. I think, you know, the tribe really needs to look at these kind of avenues of trade that's going to start happening with the expansion of broadband, and what that looks like for revenue, both for members, but also potentially for the tribe. So I think, again, you know, really being able to facilitate economic development more than just having a code. You know, you need to be able to implement it. You need to know what it's doing, and is it working, and is it aligned with, you know, your land use codes, is aligned with your assignments. I don't know if that makes sense.
Muted myself once again. And so if I'm trying to start a business, or if I'm looking at, you know, getting involved, having that storefront can certainly help quite a bit, but can you address how having some of the support systems that you see in non-Indian country could be applied in Indian country to support our, you know, our budding business owners.
Yeah, and I think, and there are, there are a lot of support systems between CDFIs. There's at the federal level, you have the Indian Loan Guarantee Program, you have NABDI grants, you have, all sorts of stuff. And going back to CDFIs, there's a lot of, funders out there that are looking to fund Native American businesses, period. I mean, they're out there, you just have to find them and then, utilize, and they're easy to find. I mean, they really are easy to find. So I think, going through the process of applying for that, the funding and making sure that everything's in line, that your legal structure is right in terms of your business structure, that you have someone like him, or have these resources available through the IRS, which are awesome for tribes, and, take advantage of all those resources. A small business development agency, like there's tons of resources out there.
Okay.
Jim, if I might just tag
yeah,
on
absolutely.
to that. I remember one of the things in working for the tribes that when we would give presentations is people would ask, where do I find these funds? Where do we find these monies to get, to boost the business I have or to start a business? So I would ask Amy, do you know, is there websites where these are listed or?
Yeah, and I can share, sorry, I just drenched myself with my water. Yes, and I'll share those with Jim. I'll go through tonight and share those this evening or tomorrow to make sure I can get a more comprehensive list together of resources for funding, both federal funds that are aimed at, and these aren't, and for tribal businesses too, whether it's a tribal enterprise or a Section 17, whatever, but also individually, Indian owned businesses, looking at those. So yes, to answer your question, Kim, I'll get together both, more traditional funding, like guaranteed loan programs, and also I'll look for different CDFIs, because there's multiples of them.
Okay, great.
And then, in a business plan. So like, for instance, and that's what I've seen. So like I do a lot of work with a tribe in Alaska, and they just mean the world to me. And several years ago when I was out there, there was a husband and a wife, and they were interested in, starting a coffee shop. And he's like, geez, Amy, I don't have any idea how to write a business plan. And, so like I've written, several, but just, like to do without compensation, even then I was, I just, do it because, and work with the individual and helping them to prepare it, so it's not like you have someone just preparing this business plan for you and you really don't know what it's all about. But to me, that's one of the challenges I've seen, is just kind of at that basic level. And I'm not saying basic, like, oh, geez, everyone should know how to do it. It's hard. It's not easy, doing a business plan and the market research and all of that. So I think, that support, in terms of support, that is hard. But there is also resources like through the Small Business Development Administration. They have resources. And I know, like, I used those resources years ago when I was even in undergrad, I think. And I went, to the SBA, and I'm like, hey, how do you put together a business plan? And, and they were really great. And I went there like every week on Thursdays, and she like walked me through the whole process. And, so it's really, and these are free services. I say free, we pay for them as taxpayers. And they really are valuable, but it's taking time that we all don't have, right? So you have to be able to commit some time to it to learn, but it's only going to make you that much stronger of an individual, and also a future, business owner too, and mentor for your future, for either, whether it's your children or your employees or whoever you're, helping kind of bring up, that you can provide that information to them as they go on.
Well, I think you've hit on a really important idea, which is we've talked so far about a lot of tribal specific resources that could help. But you bring up the important point that there are a lot of other federal programs and resources that tribal people can also make use of. And I think that that's probably one of the places in talking with, say, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They've got these programs that serve rural communities all over the place, and outside of very targeted programs, they don't have a very high participation by tribal communities. And sometimes they try and address that. Sometimes it kind of continues to float with the status quo. But again, I think we've done a good job in making sure that there are traditional resources that we can use as Indian people, but there are some other targeted resources where you'll need that specific knowledge. I think, you know, as we've talked about business, we've kind of danced around the land use issues and the legal environment that we have to deal with. And I think that's important to realize that at some point you will need experts who understand Indian country. But for business owners, a lot of it's just keeping your doors open. And that isn't an Indian problem, that's a business problem. So one of the questions I'd gotten ahead of time was to see if we had any information, or if either of you had experiences with like chambers of commerce. It was talked about, is there a person of first contact? Does the Bureau of Indian Affairs keep a list of tribal businesses or tribal economic development personnel? And I know, Kim, having worked with some of the combined Northwest tribes, do they have any efforts that they've put in to support broader development outside of tribally owned businesses? So I kind of challenge either of you to address this idea of a chamber of commerce or a business regulating entity within the tribal government.
You know, in Spokane, my general impression is that I don't even know if we have a very active chamber of commerce in our town anymore. It seems like after COVID, but I think that was true even before COVID. So I would be surprised if they have if they have the ability or capability or desire to put forth in that realm. A chamber of commerce, our chamber of commerce.
And that's the non-tribal one you're talking about, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was actually involved in our trying to start with the Colvilles a chamber of commerce, tribal chamber of commerce, and I think they got it off the ground, but I don't know if they're still in operation.
Okay. And having worked with a number of different tribes, either through your federal employment or your private practice, Amy, what has been your experience in finding somebody in the tribal setting who knows what's going on for business owners?
Yeah, I think, so I think every tribe is different and depending on their size and resources, right? And are they more focused? In my experience, a lot of tribes are more focused on tribal enterprises, and it really leaves the members kind of up. It's like, you know, you're creating your own opportunities, which is what you have to do, right? And we all have to do that, and that I think is really important for us. We have to be able to be agile and create these opportunities for ourselves. But unfortunately, I think a lot of times at the tribal government level, it's more easy to focus on tribal enterprises versus, you know, facilitating a strong private sector economy. But I will head on in terms of, you know, and I don't know of a chamber of commerce, like a tribal chamber of commerce, but I do know that the, and I'll put this in the list of websites and whatnot, but the Office of Indian energy and economic development, they have a division of economic development, and they are really valuable. Again, this is the group that does the Indian Loan Guarantee Program. That program used to be under BIA, and it's actually still kind of codified under that, but they administer that program under the Division of Economic Development. So they are a good resource.
Okay.
Again, I don't know. I would encourage, if there's tribal leaders listening, you know, I would really encourage, you know, trying to facilitate a strong private sector within that local economy.
Well, and I think that probably goes for any individuals who are interested in or already operating their own businesses. Their best advocate is going to be themselves, but they need to go to the tribe and their tribal leaders. If it's falling on deaf ears, I mean, perhaps putting in elected leaders who will pay closer attention to some of those issues. I'll kind of toot our own horn here at the Indian Land Tenure Foundation in this field. The American Indian Probate Reform Act put in a clause that stated that they'd like to take a look at corporate entities, businesses, some formal organization taking over the management for all the fractional owners, either on a parcel or a series of parcels. And it's been one of my pet projects over the last 5-6 years. It talks quite a bit about using some of the resources we've highlighted tonight, as well as additional resources to really put together, you know, your ideas. I've had Cheryl Lohman from Oregon talk about their cooperative and some of the things that they've done in the past couple of years. They've been able to get some grants to help with feasibility studies to put in certain infrastructure. But again, it came from, you know, the power of somebody advocating for themselves and then forming an organization. Now, my personal pet project within that is to also take a look at how we can provide for Indian landowners the ability to come together with their family members or some of their relatives to actually have that corporate entity own the Indian land in the way that we talk about, you know, me as an individual Indian, or, you know, the tribe as a group for the community owning it, but that corporate entity could, because I think we could come back to some parts of the tax law, Kim, but there are specific instances in which the landowner can enjoy tax exempt income from their economic activities growing from the land, but it has to be their land. I think one of the topics you had highlighted, Kim, was the whole piece about could you get some of those tax exemptions operating on somebody else's trust land? Did you want to tackle any of that?
It's been a while since I've researched that too deeply.
Sorry.
I apologize. But I will say that in my experience with Indian tribal governments and a lot of the issues that did come up, a lot of the obstacles to tribes and tribal members and their businesses, and there has to do with the federal, some of them have to do with the federal tax laws that are very arcane, and they don't address the areas where tribes and tribal members and their businesses need to be kind of set free. And I'm hoping the General Welfare Committee will work, and that's a topic for another day, but I'm hoping that that committee, which is probably the most, in my view, one of the most powerful groups in the country for tribes, that they will start to try to address and push some of these legal issues where, you know, and this land and allotments is one of those areas of law that I think we need to improve upon for sure. But in direct answer to your question, Jim, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and take a closer look at that.
Okay, fair enough. sometimes I get so deep in the weeds, I forget that it makes me an odd duck, that I know certain things in a very limited context. I think, Amy, if I kind of jump back and forth a little bit and looking at the balancing landowner interests, business owner interests versus the tribes. A lot of times when I talk with landowner groups, I'll highlight the fact that, again, they need to be their own strongest advocates, because the tribe's interests and their interests do not always align. And we talked a little bit about electing folks. Are there any particular aspects to that tribal environment that you might suggest from your experience that individuals would be most advantageous for them to take a closer look at, either on with the federal court cases and jurisprudence, has that impacts tribal communities, or any specific tribes that you've had experience in working with that have been a little bit more progressive in supporting individual landowners? I keep saying landowners, but business owners. Because like I said, that balance can be a difficult thing to strike. So are there recommendations you might make, Amy?
Well, I mean, it is difficult, and I think it also gets to, you know, what type of business it is. And I think, and two, what I see a lot of tribes struggle with, you know, how much they want to let or promote, you know, businesses to outside, you know, non-Indian folks, whether, you know, it's for tourism or it's, you know, you're living in an area that services, you know, multiple different jurisdictions, and you're looking at just having, you know, storefronts. How much are you going to try to market your services to them or not? So I think when you're talking about balance, to me, that's an important thing, you know, and not everyone's going to agree. I think, you know, some leaders are going to want to open it up and say, yeah, we need economy, and members are going to be like, you know, I don't want to up and, you know. So I would say just be active and proactive, be part of any planning processes that are taking place within your tribal government. Look for tribal documents. A lot of times they're not public, in the sense that, like, if you go to the city of Spokane and go to their website, they're going to have, you know, all their plans posted. They're going to have everything. You know, some tribes do that, but not often. But if you go to the council chambers and say, hey, you know, do you have an economic development plan, or what is our land use plan? Can I have a copy of that? Can I look at it? You know, do that and you know, read that, see, you know, what is the vision, and is it something that kind of sets well with you, or is, you know, maybe do you need to be able to make sure that you're participating at a higher level if those opportunities are there? I know that a lot of tribes, you know, sometimes those opportunities aren't there either. So
sure.
So question for Amy. Amy, do you think that partnering is something that is helpful in this realm?
Partnering with whom, Kim? What do you mean?
So if, let's say, a tribal member wants to start a business, but they're a little green, or they're, you know, could use some help. So they try to partner with somebody who's a non-Indian who has experience in that realm. I guess tribes do that at the tribal level with casinos and such. They'll partner with some other business or some other aspect of the gaming industry to you know, get a foothold. But I don't know if tribal members themselves really take advantage of that. Do you think?
I don't know that they do or not. I think it's definitely, I would definitely recommend it. I think anytime that there's a mutually beneficial opportunity that's going to benefit two parties, you know, in a fair and balanced way, I think it's definitely something that would be valuable to look at. I think, you know, the benefit, just like, you know, say in an energy development project, a big project, some energy company wants to partner with the tribe, it's going to be there's tax benefits, right? So I could see that would be a benefit too, if it, obviously if it was a 51% Native owned, but I think I definitely could see that being a good opportunity for tribal members. And, now like I've thought so much about it too. Like, and I think about these super, like very secluded villages in Alaska and other places that now, yeah, you're not going to have the greatest broadband, but you have some satellite and, whatever, but it's kind of like, developing worlds, like eons ago where you went from no phone, nothing to a cell phone, like you skipped entire swaths of technology, right? And now like it opens up all these opportunities. And like for me, in my mind, I keep thinking the opportunities for economic development on an e-commerce level, both at the tribal and membership level right now is really huge. And I think that if, members and tribes, the tribal government can, kind of work together on this, where the tribal government can, facilitate and promote these opportunities for their members, and taking advantage of the environment in terms of technology, I think is really valuable, because then you're keeping people out of your reservation, right? But you're also still having economic development. You're driving the ship or rowing the boat, however you say that. I mean, you're in charge. So I think there's just a lot of really unique opportunities, I think.
I hesitate to dive too deep into this, but you raise an interesting topic for those of us who do economics, which is what is the value of import versus exports? And in a tribal community, it doesn't make as much sense, but it still has an applicable. Too deep to dive into at this point. We've got about 3.5 minutes left. And I know Amy's got the tightest time. So is there anything that you want to share that maybe I didn't touch upon? Anything that you feel is good for the conversation in wrapping up?
I'll give that to Kim.
Well, I was going to address her next as well, but I'll let her start off then. Kim, anything that I didn't cover, any issues that kind of came up that you want to make sure the audience hears before we wrap up?
Well, I think that there's so much opportunity in Indian country, and I'm not saying this is all tribes, but I think sometimes, as you mentioned, tribes and their leaders can get caught up in issues that don't always have a lot to do with their members and helping their members start businesses and become successful. And it would be nice if more of that happened, but it seems like there needs to be a support system that is an intermediary and can really facilitate that. What that looks like, I don't know, but I think technology could play a big role in that, though, a much bigger role than it does now.
Okay.
I like that you say that too, Kim, because I mean, there's a business opportunity right there that you just named that, anybody can take that, any tribal member that has a background in that and be able to have it funded, be that intermediary and get funding to provide those support services to your tribe and to other tribes. And that's a business opportunity. There's like, making that, there's a space at the table. There's lots of spaces at the table. You need to take those spaces, basically, is what I'm saying. It's just in the years since I've been working in Indian country to see, the changes that have been made and the seats that are open and vacant all over the place. And they're just needing to be filled. Like,
right.
It's crazy. It just, there's so much opportunity. And then, but it's also like, that making those connections too. And I think, and that's where mentors like you, Kim, I mean, I could see you have so much value, and I can only imagine the people from within your own tribe and across you know, Indian country, those that you can, and probably have, I'm sure, influenced and to help, you know, through these kind of processes. But yeah, there's a lot of seats at the table.
Thank you, Amy.
I'm going to take up the last, we did get a question at the last minute. It says, do you have to get permission of other allottees in order to use an allotment for business? And yes, that is correct. Just using it, even as a co-owner within the parcel, you may potentially own 50, 60% of that allotment. You could own, you know, less than 5%. But the bottom line is, unless you own 100% of a parcel, then you will need to have permission of all of the landowners to do a specific activity, because one of the most commonly, or one of the things that's most misunderstood about fractional ownership is my 10% isn't 8 acres on an 80-acre parcel. It may behave like 8 acres, but I actually have a 10% voice over the entire 80 acres. And similarly speaking, I can't railroad my 10% ownership voice and share over somebody who has 50%, 20%, or even, you know, 1/100th of a percent ownership interest. I would most likely have to get a lease to do my business on an allotment. With having said that, thank you both for participating tonight. I want to also thank everyone who joined us. It was a little bit hour late than our standard time frame, but again, we had a good audience tonight, and I appreciate everyone. Look forward to having another conversation with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. It was great, Kim, to be able to
same here.
You and I will email you, Jim and Kim, that it'll probably be first thing in the morning. I'll send a pretty comprehensive list for you.
All right. I will make sure that gets added on our webpage for everyone's use. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.